Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Christy Meyer, and I'm the Managing Director for our Agricultural Health and Clean Water programs here at the OEC. Thank you for joining us at this webinar. Today we will be talking about how to build your best board. The Ohio Environmental Council is a membership organization, and our work is funded from people just like you, Ohioans who care about the health of Ohio's communities and environment. And if you're a current member, thank you for your support. If you're not, please join our team. You can find out more information about how to do that by going to the oec.org and clicking on the donate button on the right side of our website. So thanks again for joining us today. As a reminder, this presentation is being recorded, and you'll receive an email in the next day or so with the recording to share and any presentation materials that we may not have gotten to as of yet. You're welcome to submit questions at any time during the presentation in the chat box. In the question box. We'll wait until the end of the presentation to answer questions. Again, please submit any questions you have in the question box. Again, my name is Christy Meyer, and I would like to start today by thanking River Network and the Institute for Conservation Leadership for offering this webinar at a much reduced cost. And a little bit about these organizations and our very talented speakers today. River Network's mobilization program supports watershed organizations through consulting services, educational resources, and networking opportunities such as the National River Rally. We have two staff members with us today, Diana Toledo and Francisco Olivares, or as we know him, Paco. Diana is River Network's Mobilization Program Director and is based in Asheville, North Carolina. She has over 20 years of experience supporting citizen conservation efforts as a water policy expert, a community organizer, a funder, and an organizational management professional. Paco is a biochemical engineer who obtained both a master's in science and a doctorate degree in wildlife and fisheries from Texas A&M University. Paco works for River Network by performing strategic plans, fundraising trainings, and board development of current and potential prospective River Network organizations. The Institute for Conservation Leadership works with environmental and conservation organizations across North America to strengthen leadership and provide custom-designed capacity-building services. For information about ICL's leadership programs, distant learning, consulting assistant, and free resources, visit www.icl.org. We also have two staff members with us today from ICL, Peter Lane and Nancy Oswald. Peter is the Director of Program Services at the Institute for Conservation Leadership. He manages ICL's custom design services, provides consulting assistance to organizations, and co-facilitates ICL's Leading from Within program. Nancy is the Program Manager. She manages ICL's grant initiatives in the Great Lakes and Ohio, as well as supports the Institute's evaluation and distant learning programs. Nancy has designed and led trainings for government and nonprofits for nearly 15 years. Her specialty is in evaluation, education, and program development. Now we're going to turn it over to Diana to start with the presentation. I'm sorry, I think we need to unmute Diana for a minute. Okay, there you go, Diana.
Okay, can you hear me, Christy?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Really? Okay, good. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us in this first webinar of a two-part series. We're excited to be working with Institute for Conservation Leadership to support all of you. And as you'll note, primarily it'll be Paco and I presenting today. Peter and Nancy will be chiming in, and we'll flip it up next week where they'll be leading with the webinar. So with that, I want to go ahead and get us started. And the best way to do that is to learn a little bit about you all. So if you would, I don't think I'm able to switch the slides up. So if you could flip up, move ahead a couple of slides here. Let's bring up the first poll. So we're just curious, like to get a sense of who all we have here with us. If you could just make clear, are you on staff with your organization or are you a board member? If you would just quickly answer that question on your screen. And Jennifer, if you could give me some feedback on, are the votes coming in? I'm not sure we're allowed to talk more than one.
Yep, we are. We just, there's so many things going on. Yes, we have 100% voted. Awesome. Let me show you the.
All right. We've got.
And I can share it. So I close the poll and we can share the results.
All right, this is fantastic. 87% of you are on the board. This is perfect. All too often we offer sessions on developing a strong board, and it's primarily staff. So this is very welcome. Great to have you here. Another question about your board experience. If you could bring up the next poll, Jennifer. What's your level of board experience? Just want to get a sense of how many years you've been serving, whether it's in this board in particular or other board experiences with other organizations. If you could go ahead and just click here.
Yep, they're voting. Great. Just need a couple more people to vote. Give it a couple more seconds. 100%. Excellent.
All right.
I'll share the results.
What do we have? Great. So about over half of you have at least 5 years under your belt. That's great to see. There's a handful that are relatively new, and then a good bubble there in between 2 to 5 years. So some of what we might cover today, if you've been on a board more than 5 years or different boards, you may have heard this before. So we just ask you to continue to think about what you're hearing in the context of the organization that you're currently serving with, and be thinking about which of these practices that we're going to talk about today you might bring back to the organization. So with that, one last question, last poll. We'd love some feedback on what are the issues that your board is currently dealing with. You can select all the ones that apply. Just want to get a sense of what you're all looking for. How are the votes coming along, Jennifer?
Yep, about 60% have voted.
This one might take a little bit of thinking. So let's
yeah. Just need a couple more people to vote. Okay, 100%. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Great. So coming in at the top concern, not enough or not the right board members are aboard. So that's a significant number of you are feeling that pressure. And the board is not engaged and or burned out, which may very well be related to the fact that there's maybe not enough people on board. So about 2/3 of you fall into that category. Confusion between staff and board roles. And just a couple of you want a refresher. There's about a third of you who have other issues. So I would just, you have the chat box there as those issues, if they're relevant to what we're talking about, or if you want to ask a question, please come back through the chat box to introduce those other concerns. That you
actually,
have.
if you can use the question box rather than the chat box, it's easier for us to see and answer those questions.
Great. All right. So let's go ahead, Jennifer. Want to go over some of the goals that we have for the webinar series. If you can take us to the next slide.
Are you not seeing that slide?
No, I'm still seeing the poll results.
Oh, hold 1 second.
How's that?
No, I'm seeing the introductory slide.
Okay,
I don't know if
one second. We are really kind of new with these polls. And 1 second.
I feel like the newscaster who suddenly doesn't get the audio. Like, hello, hello.
Oh, man.
Well, Jennifer is working to pull up that slide. Let me just go over some of those. But again, the 2 webinar series, what we're hoping you'll come out of this series with is that you'll be able to reflect on the roles of the nonprofit board, roles and responsibilities that come along with that job, and start to assess areas where your own board can be strengthened. And then identify steps you can take to strengthen, in particular, board recruitment and orientation practices within your board. So that should help for, I think, the 66% who identify that as a concern. So the slide is up. Third bullet here, identifying the benefits of a board governance plan, and identify the 5 things that every plan should include. The second, we're going to talk a lot about roles and responsibilities and best practices, and then the next webinar, next Wednesday, we'll focus on how to put some of those steps into an action plan through the board governance plan. Consider steps to engage your board in creating that plan, and then putting in place accountability mechanisms. So hopefully our desired outcome for this series is that you will have all the tools you need to both identify steps you need to take to strengthen the organization, and then put them into a plan that has a buy-in from your entire board to actually address those weaknesses that you've identified. So go ahead, next slide.
Deanna, you should be able to advance. Just you have to remember to click twice on the slide.
Okay. For some reason, it's not working for me. So if I can just say.
Okay, I'll go ahead.
Next. So just to now we've overshot it. If you could go back one. Really just want to emphasize that developing the board of directors is really one of the most important things, if not the most foundational thing that you can really do for creating a strong organization. When we talk about developing a board, again, the goal is, and I think we're on the wrong slide, if you could go back a couple, is to have the right people with the right skills and the talents and the level of commitment that you need to really lead the organization. And one thing that we want to emphasize is that development of your board is an ongoing process. You never get to the point of being done developing your board because the needs of the organization change as your program changes, as your budgets change, as your organization evolves. So you're continually looking to identify new leaders that emerge, recruiting them into the organization, providing existing leaders a chance to find different roles within the organization. So this really is an ongoing process for an organization. So we need to develop some of these ongoing practices to really develop that. Next. So if we can take sort of the big picture, as I was saying, the board needs of an organization's board kind of change as an organization itself evolves. And we can look at a continuum, if you will, of 3 different kinds of boards that we've got here: organizing, governing, and institutional. And you could slice up this pie into a lot of different ways and come up with steps in between. But in essence, when you start off, an organization gets launched, it starts off with a bunch of volunteers or maybe a strong leader that recruits others who just see a need, and they get together, they form an organization to basically address that need. So your board is doing all of the work, they're engaged in the activities, it's why they got involved in the first place, and there may not be a lot of structure. And an organization can continue down that path for a while, maybe eventually as the programs grow, they hire a coordinator and maybe actually step into having ongoing stable staffing. And so they move, the organization's board moves into then a next stage that we can identify as the governing board, where as the staffing model settles into some stability, the work of the board really shifts, and navigating that shift can be a delicate dance. and some of the tensions that we identify with nonprofits is embedded in this question of how do you move into this governance role where the board is focused more on governing, more on making strategic decisions, more on raising the money to support the program, and less on the day-to-day work of managing and implementing programs. And then eventually there's a third stage, or, you know, again, we could come up with other stages in between, but an institutional board with most of our organizations are just not there. We can think about, you know, the Nature Conservancy's large national organizations where the board really has, the organization has well-developed system and multiple layers of leadership, and it's really focusing on the fundraising for that organization. But again, most of the organizations that we see in the world of watershed protection are falling somewhere in between these two initial bullets. And so thinking about your organization's, your board's role, really you need to think about the context of where are you as an organization. Go ahead next. So we can draw sort of the big picture on the roles of the board. You know, we can differentiate between board and staff, and we'll come back in a minute here to the staff roles. Having clear distinction between what board and staff does really is key to avoiding some of the sources of conflict that are pretty common with organizations. And so we can focus it on, you know, 4 big bullets here. Leadership, setting the direction that guides the work to make sure that it's fulfilling the mission of the organization. Doing the planning to actually operationalize that, whether it's the strategic plan, the annual plan. It's really putting on paper the strategic thinking of what the organization is going to focus on, who it needs to work with in order to really deliver on that mission. Providing the oversight, which is one of the most important roles of a board, protecting the trust of the public, that their funds are being well spent by providing that oversight. So keeping the big picture in mind, monitoring finances, you know, the mission, making sure you know, you're making progress through your programs, et cetera. And then finally, the resources, ensuring that there are enough resources, whether it's money, people, public credibility, that really allow you to carry out your work. And so if we can start to tease apart these 4 large categories of leadership, planning, oversight, and resources, we can talk about the roles and responsibilities of a nonprofit board. Next. You know, I've got 2 slides that really outline these. Number 1, the long-term viability of the organization. Do you have the resources you need? The board is raising money. The board is donating money, making personal contributions, opening the door to donors, really making sure that those resources are coming in. Related to that is connecting to the community by serving really as the ambassador and public representative for the organization and the community. So both helping make important connections to individuals or particular stakeholders, and then bringing your own networks to bear for the organization's benefit, bringing those back to the organization. And also the connection to the community is making sure that the programs are relevant. The board is out there interacting with the community, understands what the needs are, make sure that your programs are responding to those needs. Making decisions and setting policies, again, at the large level, determining what strategies are we going to use to protect, you know, the resources of this particular watershed. Are we an advocacy organization? Are we willing to litigate? Are we mostly primarily focused on outreach and education? Those are some of the big decisions that really help you determine how you do the work. And some of those discussions are sometimes thorny, sometimes very rich conversations as an organization examines new ways of carrying out that mission. The managing the organization, whether it's, again, you know, firing, hiring, supporting the lead staff, whether it's a coordinator or an executive director, internal policies, et cetera. Go ahead. Managing the finances. And we'll talk a little bit about the new resources that River Network is launching here shortly to help train organizations in how to do that management. Making sure there's effective planning with long-term goals, monitoring programs, and holding staff accountable to be able to articulate what are the outcomes of the work that they're doing and how are those programs actually moving the organization closer to its vision of a, whatever that vision is, a clean and restored river, perhaps. And then finally, and related to the issue that 2/3 of you are really identified as a need, is assessing your own work and replacing yourself. One of the most important committees for a board is the governance committee, making sure that board members are engaged, board members are selected strategically, and that you are making the best use of what they have to bring to the organization, and checking in with them to see how that is coming along and see if there's ways that in which you need to modify the way your board is working. So do you have who you need? Do you have the skills? Do you have the commitment? Does your board reflect the diversity of your community? Are your meetings run well and effectively? All of that is a key role. And again, probably of all these roles, the one that's most closely linked to this developing a strong board. And that's where a lot of our, we're going to focus on here. So that is a run through. I want to now move us to how this contrasts with the staff roles. So as the board is leading and planning and providing oversight, staff, once an organization first hires staff, we can bump into a lot of issues of create tension as they figure out where they're each niched. So we can define the staff roles as really the daily operations and managing of the program. This is once the board moves into governance mode. They step away from the day-to-day work of managing the programs. Staff is implementing the policies and really keeping the board fully informed about issues that are coming up or activities that are really part of the life of the organization. So new challenges, new threats in the basement, in the basin, excuse me. Key partnerships that you're entering into. Really keeping the board engaged so that they really can deliver on this role of serving as the ambassador of the organization. Unless they have this information, it's really difficult for the board to carry out that ambassador role effectively. And so the next slide really helps draw out some of these distinctions. And you will have access to all of these slides afterwards. So if you haven't already. So if we can, I don't want to just go through and read, some of the key differences here is to think about the board acting as a group on behalf of the organization. The group is a body that is providing that oversight and guidance. And management really are individuals that are working on behalf of the organization. And that, really impacts how they carry out their work on behalf of the organization. The board is not, an issue expert. They are a volunteer for the organization, and they're usually focused on key parts of the whole organization, whether they're most active in a committee that's focusing on governance or on fundraising or on programs, whether they're the treasurer and primarily focused on financial management, whereas staff really is involved with everything and have the big picture and the detailed picture of everything. So that flow of information, again, is pretty key to make sure that the board has enough of that big picture to articulate that publicly. I don't know that I want to spend any more time on this. Now we're really going to delve into the board piece, but we will come back to this in a homework assignment that we're going to have you all tackle here after this webinar before next week. Another important distinction, which I really want to highlight, is that the board is wearing two different hats. Each board member is wearing two different hats at any given time, and it's helpful to think about this as distinct roles. One is the governance role, and the other role is the support role. And I want you to consider the framework that we're offering here, because it can help, again, provide clarity on some of the issues that sometimes arise with board effectiveness or with board staff interactions. Next. So if we can look at the distinction between the governance and the support role, when a board is governing, they're acting as a body. You know, you have a 10-person board. They're making decisions as a 10-person board. Are we going to litigate? You know, are we going to advocate and lobby, you know, at the state capitol or in your zoning, you know, zoning department? When you're in a supporting role, board members also have this individual role in which they're supporting the organization. When the board is governing, the board is the boss. Staff is implementing the policies that the board approves. And what are they doing? Those are the big decisions, the strategic decisions, again, litigate, not enter into this key partnership or not, providing the legal oversight, ensuring that, you know, the organization's programs are impactful and make efficient use of resources. If we contrast, though, that with the supporting role, this is where individual board members are still always serving as volunteers. And so when they're doing that work, when they're providing, say, technical expertise as part of a committee, or when they are helping implement the organization's fundraising plan, because they're donors or they're, you know, helping cultivate major donor prospects, et cetera, et cetera. The board here is not, you know, it's an individual board member that's taking on these roles. It is not the entire board. And in that case, the board member is really acting under the direction of staff. Staff, the executive director, is making sure that as all of the board members are out there lending their expertise through committees or, you know, putting into place the fundraising activities to help implement the whole larger fundraising plan, it's the staff that makes sure that all of this work is coordinated, that, you know, we don't have 3 different board members contacting a major donor, or that, you know, we have one person leading on exploratory conversations with a prospective partner, you know, another NGO in the community, say. So here it's the staff that's really guiding that work. And understanding this question of who is the boss really is pretty key. And sometimes if you're finding that this framework helps answer some of the challenges within your organization, certainly we are available to help you think about how you might bring this framework into your board meeting to have a discussion about clarifying these 2 roles that the board is playing. So with that, if we can, I don't know if there are any questions. I'm not tracking before we go into covering the homework assignment.
Yeah, Deanna, this is Christy. There was 2 questions. We can ask. One was, please describe the expectations of board members when the board is constituted as a policy governing administrative. Sorry, I can't speak today. Administrative board.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again, Christy?
So, yeah, describe the expectations of board members when the board is made up as a policy governing administrative board. So,
you know, I would say there's not one job description that fits every organization, and I hope that doesn't come as a cop-out. What I would say, my best advice, and I'll invite Nancy and Peter and Paco to weigh in here, is to just as a group develop a consensus on what those expectations are, and to actually commit them to paper. Whether that is every board member is supposed to, you know, serve on the policy, you know, committee, or serve on one, or you know, things that you oftentimes see. Those job descriptions is of meeting attendance or special event attendance. Every board member has to come to, you know, the year, or every board member is expected to help carry out a fundraising plan, certainly for themselves. So there's a lot of things that can fit into that job description. Some organizations call it a board member contract, or sometimes it's more like a handshake on paper. But the real key thing is, as an organization, decide what are those expectations, be very clear about what those are, and articulate that to folks and have a discussion about what those mean as you're recruiting them into the board, so that they are not then surprised once they've been voted into the board that they are expected to do things that really they had no idea about. And that oftentimes comes in the area of fundraising. We're uncomfortable telling a prospective board member that they're expected to raise money for the organization, and so we sort of keep that to ourselves until they're on the board, and then blindside them with that, and then are frustrated when they don't help with that fundraising. So we have a number of examples of board contracts and board agreements, and can certainly share those with you, so you can look at some ways other organizations have defined that. But I would say that no one size fits all. With that, Nancy or Peter or Paco, is there anything you would add to that?
This is Peter, and Deanna, I would agree. I mean, I think the list of practices in the earlier slides is a good list of the practices of just about any board. I mean, it might change slightly depending on sort of where your organization is in its development, but those are all activities that boards should be involved in.
This is Paco. Peter, you done?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm thinking about a group that is an administrative or governing board, and like Deanna said, if they're not expected to do fundraising because it may be a government group that already has their funding allocations, then that is very, very clear. But I would say that most nonprofits, most boards are expected to do fundraising. Mm-hmm. And maybe this exercise actually will help you determine what is your existing situation in terms of who's more responsible of doing which part. And we can also share what are our suggestions on which people should do which parts.
Hmm? If you can hold that other question, Christy, the next slide is going to open it up for a couple of minutes. So let me just go over the homework here briefly. And I think everybody received this prior to the webinar. Is that correct, Jennifer?
Yes, they should have.
We did have a question, though, about would it be supplied in an email, so we will send it out with after the webinar.
Okay. So what you have in front of you is this document that you've gotten and you will get via email. It's what we call a shared leadership form, and it goes through a number of tasks that are, basic organizational tasks for any nonprofit to carry out over the course of a year. And what we're asking you is to fill it out for yourself. Who should be responsible, and then the lead person. You see there's a whole continuum there of answers that you could provide for any given task. It's not so much that there's a right and a wrong answer to this, but what can be a very helpful exercise, and I would suggest if you have more than one representative from your organization here at the webinar, for you to fill it out individually. This can be a great tool to help identify areas where there is lack of clarity on who should be taking the lead on these tasks. And it can be a very helpful exercise to run through as an entire board. So if you could just take time here in the coming week to fill out that, form, we will come back and just debrief on that at the beginning of the next webinar. Okay, next. So then just other questions. Christy, I think there was another question come there you had.
Yeah, so Deanna, another question was, could you give some thought about appropriate board size? Like, how do you determine appropriate board size?
Well, I think the average, last time I saw the numbers, and I'm not going to get this right, but I think the national average is about 15 to 18 individuals making up a nonprofit board. I think it's hard to look at averages because we've got, there are huge, more corporate type NGO boards that are included in that average. Certainly enough people to do the work, and not so many that it becomes difficult to manage for the staff. And my rule of thumb is usually 8 to 13. I don't know how I came to 8 to 13, but I've not seen organizations that have less than 8 board members who really have enough folks doing it. Even at that size of 8, it assumes you have a well-developed committee structure that includes a lot of other volunteers outside of your board that are helping do the work. 13 to 15 is probably about as many as I've seen that are functioning well, again, in the world of watershed organizations that don't have huge staffs typically, and so managing that board and supporting the leadership of that board to make sure all the board members are engaged becomes more difficult once you get that beyond that magic number of, in the mid-teens. And again, I will open it up to my co-facilitators. I'm not backing this up with any hard science. I think this is more my gut instinct from what I've seen on the ground. I don't know if others have different opinion on that.
Well, this is Nancy from ICL, and I would say that our experience mirrors Deanna's suggestions or feedback. Certainly looking at that 8 to 13 range, we've certainly worked with a number of organizations that have been even in the 20 range. And again, with any group, you're going to have, if the larger you are, the more likely you're going to have a lot of unengaged board members, just looking at how numbers often work. And I do want to go back to the poll that we started out with at the top of the hour, and looking that most of you identified that one of your greatest challenges or issues that you're dealing with are not enough board members or not the right board members on your board. So looking at that number where you are at now and adjusting upwards.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Another suggestion would be to make sure that you have more than one board member per committee. So committees of one are really not effective. So if you have four committees and only 4 board members, and then you have to recruit more board members. If you have committees that don't have a lot of diversity in it, then they are not as effective.
Yeah, and really thinking of those committees as the place where you're going to find your next batch of board members. So being as flexible to opening those up to non-board members as you're comfortable doing. Definitely a good tip. We did have a question ourselves, if you might take us to that, and I don't know if folks have any thoughts on this. As we think back to the homework and the question of the shared leadership and who does what, Jennifer, would you click?
Yeah, hold on, Deanna, this is Christy. So we had just one other question, and it is pertinent to the homework. It says the shared leadership form provided is different from what was in the slide. It says who is responsible now versus who should be responsible.
Oh, yes.
Clarify.
I'm so glad. As I saw this slide, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Definitely use the one that you were given. I'm sorry, I didn't update it in my slide. But yes, as you think about who is versus who should be, that's where you can really pull out, okay, what are our challenges here? Who do we need to, how do we need to articulate the expectations for either staff or board on that? So definitely fill out the one that's, that you are going to be emailed. Thank you. So I will ask the question, just I'm watching the previous, okay. I don't know, are there any aspects of your work in your organization where you think more clarity could be helpful that you can identify at this point of who is doing it, whether it's staff or board? I'd love to get some feedback on that if anybody can write in the question box if that's the case. Are we getting any responses, Jennifer?
This is Christy. I'm just giving a moment for people to type.
Hmm?
Okay. Well, we're not getting anything.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to this after next week after you've done you filled out the sheet.
I apologize, Deanna. Sorry. There was a. Could you please repeat the question?
It's the question that's on the slide.
She doesn't have the slides.
Oh, unfortunately, this person is having a problem seeing the slides.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Are there any aspects of your organization's work where more clarity on the staff versus the board role could be helpful?
And we did get, yes, so more clarity on managing staff, and then also, yes, on all aspects.
Okay.
Oh, and I should say managing staff in day-to-days versus the big picture.
Mm-hmm. There are some rules of thumb on staff management. Christy, can you identify who submitted that question?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It's Sunrise.
Okay. Sunrise. You know, as a general tip, I would say the board. If you have more than one staff person, it is the board that is managing the lead senior staff, whether that is the coordinator or the executive director, who then is managing the rest of staff. That's about as close as we can get to a generality, but I would say if there are particular concerns that don't neatly fit into that model, please reach out to us after the webinar so we can help you think through it.
And Deanna, there was another one as well. Who develops internal policies and who determines new strategic directions?
That is the board. In internal policies, oftentimes the staff, the executive director is supporting the board in that role, you know, helping perhaps collect similar policies from other organizations, etc. But the board is really determining and voting and approving both strategic directions and key policies for the organization. Staff, again, might support that development, but it is ultimately the board's decision and vote that drives it. Okay, let's keep moving and collect those questions. I want to make sure we're running a couple of minutes behind, and so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Paco to get more into some of the nitty-gritty here.
Paco, you're unmuted now.
Yes, thank you very much. That last question was very good in terms of strategic direction. Immediately people would think, well, how can a board member who's not engaged decide the direction in the future? And that's precisely the key. The staff is responsible for keeping them informed of obstacles, of new partnership opportunities, of new threats, and that's why by keeping those board members actually engaged and participants, they're able to help us think of the big picture. I would like to share with everybody some of what we call the best management practices, but in terms of creating a strong board, some tips that will help you that we started to allude earlier and that we will follow up with the second part of the webinar next week. The first one is the selection. Board members that are assigned to particular groups are definitely less engaged than those that are selected, and again, this is an ongoing process of cultivation, and this fits into your particular needs of resources and skills. The second practice is this articulation of expectations, this clarification of what needs to be done, what time commitment there is, and if the person that is deciding to become a board member is willing to do this. To have those expectations perfectly articulated, we definitely have to provide this ongoing education of board members, which surprisingly many groups don't do formally. And informal orientations will yield informal expectation commitments. So I would strongly recommend people to do more of a formal process of orientation, of, again, debriefing regularly, which leads to our number 4 in terms of promoting the sense of a teamwork. The board is there as mostly volunteers, but they're committed to helping your group succeed. And if there's frustration from what we have in our participants, of a lot of them are experienced, and maybe a lot of them have heard this, but they don't know how to go beyond these limitations. So I think it comes down to active chairs, active leaders in your board that are able to rally this team. And these leaders, unfortunately, they're not there forever, and they may have to move on. So a careful selection of who will be next is also important in terms of the governance. See if I can advance my slide. And I'll provide a few more details of each of our best management practices. But like I said, this selection process that is throughout the year will be very, very important for you guys to consider in terms of what you have right now, the skills that each board member is bringing, the knowledge, the context they may have with other nonprofits or with minority groups, and even the composition of your board. As a rule of thumb, I recommend the composition of your board to reflect the composition of the population in your watershed in terms of percentages. So definitely bear that in mind. We have a profile grid that is easy to fill out with the names of your board members and particular skill sets that they're looking for.
Paco, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. It is a little hard to hear you. If maybe you could speak up a little bit, that would help. And maybe turn down your speaker. We're getting a little bit of static on our end. Thank you.
Okay, I hope that is better. I'm turning down the speaker volume and trying to go a little bit slower. But I was just alluding to a profile grid can be provided or can be made if you guys have any questions there. Trying to advance my slide. The expectations is, I think, and we saw it in the percentages of your responses. So when board members are not engaged, it's because maybe they didn't know what was expected of them. The story that I always go back to is staff saying, our board is not engaged. We asking staff, what did you say they were expected to do? And their response is, attend 3 or 4 board meetings. And if the board member is actually attending those meetings, they're doing what they thought was expected of them. If the expectation is prepare before the board meeting, help open doors for fundraising, be involved in one committee, if those things are spelled out, then that's a way to actually measure if the board member is working or not. So it goes back to basics in terms of a job description, that we also have some forms that can be customized to your organization, some commitment forms that could be filled out in terms of, again, the expectations. So make sure you get back to us if you need some of these forms, if you need some advice. But this is my recommendation of how to get people engaged by spelling ahead of time or as soon as they become board members what is expected of them. The information I alluded to in terms of the orientation or the information, board members are always craving to provide their skill sets, but they may not know where they are expected to help. So the board manual is also has contact information of other board members so that this new board member feels like they are coming into a well-organized group. In the job descriptions or in the committee descriptions, you also should spell out how often you meet, if you meet by phone, if you meet in person, if you do a mix, how long these meetings last. Again, spelling out if there's going to be a board retreat or an end-of-year get-together. For new board members, we sometimes also recommend a mentor, a veteran board member that can maybe help check in with them. Last thing you want is to be a board member and you're afraid to ask questions because you're new. So these documents will help you see the history of the organization, see where it's going currently, and get a feel of where you would fit best. Even though there are some committee descriptions, the work plans are, I find time and time are not spelled out, and they're only in the head of the chair. And so these work plans for the year can be revised, but definitely should be out there for sharing. And Diana did mention that committees do not only have to be made out of board members. They can also be made out of general members or even volunteers. But a board member should chair the committee so that there's some accountability in reporting back at the board meetings. And there's also even more effective ways of reporting back at board meetings if, like we said, there's 18 board members, 7 committees. You don't want to spend too much time just reporting. There could be a succinct form that could be filled out ahead of time. Everybody knows effective board committees work most effectively in between board meetings, not at the actual board meeting. I'm going to go to the next slide. This committee form here, it's a tool that I have used before in terms of just spelling out who are the current members of that committee, and like I was saying, some of the major responsibilities, so that we can make sure people are signing up for what they expect. But it also helps them, again, feel that like they're engaged, feel like they are part of a bigger mission. And again, in a sense, it helps determine how much staff input is occurring at these committees. Because board members sometimes expect staff to do some of the work, and staff is expecting the board to be doing the same type of work. So these miscommunications maybe are alleviated by spelling this out here. And again, staff does participate in committees, but it's not the only workforce around the committees. And finally, oh no, this is my 4th point. I think I still have a 5th point, but one of my last points that I want to make is that the engagement will actually can go all the way to an evaluation of effectiveness. This, what I mean is, you can do a confidential self-evaluation, or a board chair could also want to circle back to a board member that is not being effective, especially when you have boards that are over 13 members. 1 or 2 may be weaker or less engaged. And we understand that there's personal life, there's always exceptions. But if it's a reoccurring situation where that person is just not meeting the minimum amount what is expected of them, then there could be an opportunity to ask them to not run for re-election of term, or for stepping down to allow for new ideas come in. It is tricky. These people are you guys are very, very passionate, but at the same time, we want to keep the level of energy high, and that's why most groups should have term limits, and even how much those term limits are up for re-elections, just to be circling and to be looking for board members. Some groups say, well, we're having a hard time just even finding the right board members, so we will lose all this institutional knowledge, hence why you create these board manuals, hence why you create these strategic plans. You keep things in writing. You use those board members, maybe the founders, maybe board members that are about to step down in other capacities. You use them as advisors, you use them as mentors, and you still give them their due importance and recognition. So that is a part of the exit interview and even a recognition of their term.
Paco, this is Christy. I apologize. I just want to let you know that we have 5 minutes left.
Okay. Okay. Can you please advance to the next slide? I will skip over the leadership transition, but these are basic steps that you should make sure you have for the governance that we will be talking in terms of the next week. These are areas that you want to make sure you cover. Please go to the next one. We have forms for that. Some of them have been emailed to you. Others, you can send me an email. We just need to make sure that your most effective boards have a very, very, very dynamic leader. They're well represented in terms of diversity, composition, and skill sets. That each of their job descriptions and the committee's responsibilities are clearly specified so that there's no overlap with staff, and that there is free-flowing information and communication so that this camaraderie and this teamwork can work more effectively. The board members will feel more engaged if they're doing significant work. Nobody likes to be going to board meetings when they don't think they're contributing. So you need to make sure that they're having that personal satisfaction without bending too much of the staff time into catering every single board request. So it is strategic, but it can be done. Please go to the next one. So we mentioned this, the homework that you're assigned, and we also want to alert you to a new series we just launched yesterday on financial management. Sometimes helps for the Finance Development Committee. There's my information. We do have our national conference coming up in Pittsburgh next year, where we provide a lot of more of these type of trainings and workshops. The next one, please. And again, we have several web pages that you can access for River Network, but I will leave a few minutes if anybody has any specific question or comment from my panelists, please.
Yeah, we haven't received any other questions. If there are any questions, please feel free to type them in the question box.
I saw one on the panelist chat box that is the typical length of service of a board member. I think the national average is 2.1 years, and usually up for 2 terms.
Yeah, the other question was, are there proven approaches to ask a board member to resign? Again, I would go back to Paco's comment that if you have a board that's not, either a board member that's not engaged or active at all, this is really for the chair of the board. It's the best place to have that conversation one-on-one, to explore with them what are some of the barriers to their participation. And I would almost approach it as an invitation to find other ways in which they can contribute to the board, to the organization, excuse me. So it's not so much, you know, the soft sell approach would be not so much asking them to step off. Rather, are there other ways? Is there a committee that can better make use of your interest and talents and yet not make demands that, you know, you may not have the time to really carry out? So trying to find other ways so you don't lose them completely would be the best approach. And then if that doesn't work, sometimes it does. You know, there are organizations that are all too shy about asking actually somebody who's having maybe an actual very negative impact on the board to step aside, but that sometimes it has to come to that. I don't know if others would add to that.
I'll add, this is Peter at ICL. The other thing that I was thinking of, just sort of piggybacking with what Paco said about evaluation of the work, I think if you do develop kind of a culture of self-evaluation and the board evaluating itself and individual members assessing their performance each year, that helps you or helps board members retire on their own as opposed to you having to step in and ask them to retire. And I think that's what you want to do before you have to ask them to leave the board.
And so what happens if, you know, you are the only one, or there's only one or two of you that actually do all the work, and the rest of the board isn't that engaged? What do you do then? Even though you have term limits?
As a board, I would encourage them to undertake a self-assessment. So to have actually board individually assess themselves and assess themselves as a body, as a board, and use that as a jumping off point, to have an honest discussion about what is happening. Oftentimes lack of engagement is due to some very particular reasons. You know, Paco was saying lack of clarity of expectations, or the board meetings happen Tuesday nights and they can't make a Tuesday night meeting, or, you know, all kinds of things you might learn. So if really it is down to 2 working board members, that would clue me in that there's larger issues at play, and some anonymous evaluations could help identify what those issues are. It can be helpful to bring in an outsider, because sometimes that may be due to the way the executive director runs the organization, and there's challenges there. So sometimes having a third-party facilitator can help guide that discussion.
That goes also with what Diana was explaining earlier about the evolution of boards. At the beginning, the boards are actually a group of friends that created that group, and so they're very, very invested. But as the group grows, it becomes a little bit more bureaucratic, and maybe some people that are not as invested are invited. At the beginning, everybody's of similar thinking and even of similar demographics, so that's not a diverse board, but it is important to bring in different points of view from the community to, again, circle back to tying yourself to the community and having the pulse of other members. So it goes along the lines of spelling out what staff is expected to do and what these board members are hopefully being brought forth.
Well, it is a little bit after 2, so I want to first thank our speakers, and thanks for all the excellent questions and our attendees that have come. I want to let everybody know that we will send out the webcast link and all the materials by tomorrow morning, and then we'll see you next week, October 9th, same place, same time, 1 to 2 p.m., and we look forward to that as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a wonderful week. Take care.
Thank you all.